The siren's song explained. A beautiful melody or a chorus of madness? We are told the story of the sirens, the beautiful bird-like women who perched on a rocky, flower-strewn island, luring sailors to their doom with a melody so enchanting, so irresistible, that no mortal man could hear it and survive. Their voices were a promise of forbidden knowledge, of ultimate pleasure, a song that led only to a shipwrecked grave upon a shore of bleaching bones. It is a tale of deadly temptation, a simple and potent warning against the allure of fatal beauty. But what if this is a profound misunderstanding of a far more complex and terrifying psychic phenomenon? What if the sirens were not singing? What if they were not even alive in the way that we understand it? What if their legendary song was not a melody, but the collected, telepathic screams and regrets of every sailor who had ever died at sea? A chorus of madness that shatters the minds of all who hear it. Today, we sail into the treacherous waters of legend, towards an island that is not a home, but an antenna. We will uncover a story not of monsters, but of resonators. This is not a tale of seduction. It is a tale of a psychic graveyard, an eternal echo of despair, and the so-called monsters who were, in fact, its first and most tragic victims. Welcome to Mythos Unveiled. Today, we seek to explain the siren's song, not as a beautiful melody, but as a terrifying, mind-breaking chorus of the damned. To understand the nature of the song, we must first understand the nature of the singers. Who were the sirens? The ancient texts are fragmented, often contradictory. Some say they were the daughters of the river god Achilles. Others claim they were the handmaidens of the young goddess Persephone, the maiden of spring. Let us follow this latter thread, for it is here that the tragedy begins. In the days before her abduction, when the world was in a state of eternal spring, the sirens were not monstrous bird women. They were beautiful, joyful nymphs, companions to the young goddess. Their defining feature was their voices. They possessed a gift for music so profound, so divinely perfect, that it was said their songs could make the gods themselves weep with joy. Their melodies were the sound of life itself, of flowers opening, of sunlight warming the earth. Then came the darkness. Hades, the grim king of the underworld, burst forth from the earth and abducted Persephone, dragging her down into his shadowy realm. Her joyful cry of surprise turned into a scream of terror. And her companions, the sirens, were there. They saw it happen. They heard her final, desperate cry for help. But they were powerless to stop it. They were nymphs, spirits of nature, not warriors. They could only watch as their mistress was stolen away. Demeter, Persephone's mother and the great goddess of the harvest, arrived to find her daughter gone. In her all-consuming grief and rage, she turned on the handmaidens. "You were with her," she accused, her voice cracking with a sorrow that would soon plunge the world into winter. "You heard her cry. Why did you do nothing? Why did you not fly to her aid?" The sirens wept. "We have no wings, great goddess," they pleaded. "We could not follow her into the sky or into the earth." And Demeter, in a moment of terrible, grief-stricken, and misguided magic, gave them what they asked for. "Then you shall have wings," she declared. Her divine power washed over them, and a painful, horrifying transformation began. Their beautiful human arms sprouted feathers, elongating into powerful wings. Their legs twisted, their feet hardening into the sharp talons of a bird of prey. They were no longer nymphs. They were now chimeras, half woman, half bird, trapped in a form that was neither one nor the other. They had been given the means to search for their lost mistress, a physical manifestation of their failure. They flew across the world, their hearts heavy with guilt, their beautiful voices now used to sing songs of lament, searching for any sign of Persephone. But they found nothing. They had failed. And in their failure, they retreated from the world of gods and men. They found a remote, rocky island, Anthemoessa, the Isle of Flowers, a tragic echo of the meadow where they had lost their queen. And there they waited. But Demeter's curse was not just physical. The beautiful voices that had once sung of life and joy were now tainted by their grief, by their failure, by the memory of Persephone's final scream. Their gift had become their burden, and over time, isolated on their island, surrounded only by the endless, sorrowful sound of the sea, something else began to happen. Their gift began to change, to mutate. The island of Anthemoessa was no ordinary piece of land. It was a place of strange natural acoustics, a place where the winds and the waves created a constant low-level hum. More than that, it was a place of immense psychic energy. It was a nexus point, a place where the veil between the world of the living and the echoes of the dead was unnaturally thin. It was, in essence, a graveyard, not a physical one but a spiritual one. For centuries, countless sailors had perished in the treacherous waters surrounding it. Their ships dashed against the hidden rocks. Their final, terrified moments, their desperate cries, their regrets, their love for the families they would never see again. All of this psychic energy did not simply dissipate. It lingered, trapped in the strange, magnetic field of the island. It was a vast, silent, underwater chorus of despair. The sirens, in their profound grief and isolation, became attuned to this energy. Their divine, musically gifted natures, once designed to channel joy, now became a conduit for this immense, ambient sorrow. They were not just living on a graveyard. They were becoming its speakers. They did not sing in the way we understand it. They did not compose melodies or write lyrics. They simply opened their mouths, and the pain of the island, the pain of the sea, flowed through them. They became psychic resonators, living antennas, broadcasting the collected, telepathic agony of every soul that had ever been lost in those waters. The lost log of the Argo, a supposed first-hand account from a sailor on Jason's quest, describes the phenomenon. It was not a song. It was 1,000 voices at once, yet none of them. I heard my mother calling my name. I heard the laughter of the child I had yet to conceive. I heard the sound of my own bones breaking against the rocks. It was not a sound for the ears, but for the soul. And it promised everything, just to make the pain of its promise unbearable. This is the true nature of the siren's song. It is not a single, beautiful melody. It is a complex, multi-layered, telepathic broadcast of pure, distilled, and weaponized emotion. When a ship of sailors approached the island, they would enter its psychic field. The song would begin not as a sound, but as a feeling, a sudden, inexplicable melancholy. Then the sirens would act as amplifiers, focusing the ambient psychic energy and tailoring it to each individual sailor. One man would hear the voice of his wife, begging him to come home to her. Another would hear the promise of a treasure so great it would make him a king. A third, a man with a dark secret, would hear the whispers of his own guilt, offering him a final, terrible absolution. The song was not a lie. It was a reflection. It found the deepest desire or the deepest fear in a man's heart and played it back to him with the volume turned up to a mind-shattering degree. It promised a personal, irresistible heaven, while simultaneously being a symphony of universal hell. The allure was not just pleasure. It was the promise of an end to striving, the promise of finally having the one thing your soul craved most. And that promise was so powerful, so absolute, that it would override every instinct for survival. Sailors would be driven into a state of ecstatic madness. They would forget their duty, forget their comrades, forget the ship beneath their feet. They would leap into the sea, desperate to swim towards the source of this personal, perfect promise. Or they would seize control of the ship's helm, steering it directly into the jagged, hidden rocks that surrounded the island. The result was always the same: a shipwreck, more deaths, and more souls, with their own fresh agonies and regrets, added to the terrible, ever-growing chorus. The sirens were trapped in a horrifying, self-perpetuating cycle. They were the instruments of a tragedy that fed itself, their own grief a magnet for the grief of others, which they were then cursed to broadcast for all eternity. The fame and terror of the sirens spread throughout the ancient world. They became a legendary peril, a final test on the map of any great sea voyage. And one of the first heroes to face this test was Jason, on his quest for the Golden Fleece with his crew of Argonauts. Jason was not the wisest of heroes, but he had a wise counselor, the sorceress Medea. Or, in some earlier tellings, the Argonauts had on board a hero whose own power could rival the siren's song. This was Orpheus, the master musician, the son of the muse Calliope. As their ship, the Argo, approached the treacherous waters of Anthemoessa, the crew began to feel it. A strange listlessness, a deep sense of longing. Then the song began, a soundless sound that filled their minds with visions of home, of glory, of loves lost and treasures found. The sailors began to stir, their eyes growing glassy, their hands loosening on their oars. But Orpheus was prepared. He took up his lyre, the instrument that could charm the very gods, and he began to play. He did not try to block out the siren's song. He knew that was impossible. You cannot block out a reflection of your own soul. Instead, he offered a countermelody. He played a song that was even more beautiful, more powerful, and more compelling. The siren's song was a song of the past, of regret, of personal selfish desire. Orpheus played a song of the future, of camaraderie, of heroic purpose, of the glorious quest that lay before them. His music was not about what they had lost, but about what they could achieve together. It was a song of order against the chaos of individual despair. His divine music washed over the crew, clearing their minds, reminding them of their oaths, of their quest, of the man sitting next to them. It was a battle of melodies, a psychic war fought on the waves. And for a moment, the heroic, forward-looking song of Orpheus was stronger. The Argo sailed past the island. Most of the crew were saved, but not all. One Argonaut, Butes, the son of Teleon, was so overcome by the siren's promise of pure pleasure that he could not resist. He leaped from the ship and swam towards the island and his doom. The song had claimed a victim. The sirens, hearing the beautiful, defiant music of Orpheus's lyre, were said to have been so distraught that another song could be more beautiful than their own, that they threw themselves into the sea and perished. This is the simple, heroic version of the story. But the unveiled truth is more complex. They were not distraught by the beauty of his song. They were, for a brief, shining moment, healed by it. Orpheus's music, a song of pure, creative, and orderly life, was the antidote to the chorus of death they were cursed to channel. For a moment, it silenced the screams in their own heads. And in that moment of quiet clarity, they finally understood the true horror of their existence. They saw themselves not as singers, but as monstrous instruments of pain. And in their despair at this revelation, they chose to end their own cursed existence, a final, tragic act of self-awareness. Centuries later, another great hero would face the sirens. The cunning king of Ithaca, Odysseus, on his long, 10-year journey home from the Trojan War. Odysseus, unlike Jason, was a man defined not by heroic strength, but by his intellect, his curiosity, and his deep understanding of human and divine weakness. He had been warned about the sirens by the sorceress Circe. She had told him of their deadly song and given him a way to survive it. "You must plug the ears of your crew with soft beeswax," she instructed, "so they hear nothing. But if you, in your curiosity, wish to hear the song for yourself, you must have your men bind you to the mast of the ship, tie you hand and foot so tightly that you cannot break free, and you must command them under solemn oath that no matter how much you plead, no matter how much you beg or command them to release you, they must only bind you tighter." Odysseus, ever the seeker of knowledge, could not resist the opportunity to be the only man to hear the siren's song and live to tell the tale. He followed Circe's instructions precisely. As their ship approached the flowery, bone-strewn island, he had his men plug their ears with beeswax until they were deaf to the world. Then they bound him to the great mast, wrapping the ropes around him until he was as much a part of the ship as its keel. And he waited. At first, there was nothing but the sound of the wind and the waves. Then he felt it, a profound sense of peace, a feeling that his long, arduous journey was finally over. The song began to work its magic on him. He saw not bird women on a rock, but the beautiful nymphs of old. And they did not sing of simple pleasure. They sang a song tailored perfectly for him, for Odysseus the wise, the curious, the hero of Troy. "Come closer, famed Odysseus." They sang, their voices a perfect blend of all the voices he had ever loved. "Glory of the Achaeans, stop your ship and listen to our song. For no one has ever sailed past this place without listening to the sweet melody from our lips, and then going on their way, filled with delight and wiser than before." They promised him knowledge, the one thing he craved more than anything. "For we know everything," the song continued, its psychic tendrils wrapping around his mind. "We know all the suffering that the Greeks and Trojans endured on the plains of Troy. We know every secret of the gods. We know your past, and we can show you your future. We know the location of your home, Ithaca. We can tell you if your wife, Penelope, has been faithful. We know if your son, Telemachus, has grown into a man. We know everything that happens on this fruitful earth. Come to us and you will know it too." It was the ultimate temptation. It was a promise to end his struggle, to answer every question that haunted him, to give him the one thing a hero's journey is meant to provide: a final, absolute truth. His mind broke. He was consumed by a desperate, maddening need to go to them. He screamed at his men, his voice raw with command. "Untie me! Release me! Turn the ship! I command you!" But his men, their ears safely plugged with wax, could not hear his words. They saw only their king, writhing against his bonds, his face a mask of ecstatic agony. And, remembering their oath, they did not release him. Instead, two of them, Perimedes and Eurylochus, went to him and, as instructed, pulled the ropes even tighter, binding him more securely to the mast until the ropes cut into his flesh. Odysseus thrashed and wept and commanded, his mind a battlefield between his own iron will and the overwhelming psychic assault of the song. He was living 1,000 lives, seeing 1,000 truths, feeling 1,000 regrets, all in the space of a few terrifying minutes. He was experiencing the undiluted chorus of madness. And then, as the ship sailed past the island, the song began to fade. The promises of knowledge turned back into the distant, sorrowful screams of the dead. The beautiful visions dissolved, leaving only the sight of a rocky island littered with the skeletal remains of ships and men. His mind, slowly, painfully, returned to him. He slumped against the mast, exhausted, weeping, and for the first time, truly understanding the nature of the horror he had just survived. He had not just resisted a beautiful song. He had weathered a psychic hurricane that could tear a soul apart. His survival was not a testament to his strength, but to the strength of his bonds, and the loyalty of a crew who could not hear his pleas. He had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had sung back to him with the voices of all his hopes and all his fears. There is another lesser-known prophecy about the sirens. It was foretold that they would meet their end when a mortal man heard their song and managed to sail past without being lured to his doom. With the successful passage of Odysseus, this prophecy was fulfilled. What happened then? Did they, as in the tale of Orpheus, cast themselves into the sea in despair? Perhaps, but let us consider another, more tragic possibility in line with our unveiled truth. The sirens were not just singers. They were prisoners. They were trapped on that island, bound by Demeter's ancient curse and by the terrible psychic energy they were forced to channel. They were as much victims as the sailors they lured. When Odysseus sailed past, he did something no one had ever done. He listened to the entirety of their terrible chorus, endured the full force of its psychic onslaught, and survived. He had, in essence, absorbed the full concentrated blast of the island's misery without adding his own death to it. In doing so, perhaps he broke the cycle. By surviving, he proved that the song was not absolute. He introduced a new concept into the island's closed system, the concept of resistance, of survival. When the last echo of Odysseus's ship had faded, perhaps a new kind of silence fell upon the island of Anthemoessa. The terrible chorus of the dead, its power finally met and weathered by a mortal will, at last began to fade. The psychic screams that had echoed for centuries finally grew quiet. And the sirens, for the first time since they had lost Persephone, were left alone with their own personal grief. The external noise was gone. There was only the sound of their own sorrow, and in that final, profound silence, they found a kind of peace. Their purpose, their terrible, cursed function was over. They did not need to throw themselves into the sea. Their physical forms, sustained for so long by the psychic energy, simply faded. They dissolved like sea foam on the shore, their bird-like bodies turning to dust, their ancient sorrow finally released into the wind. They did not die in defeat. They were finally, mercifully allowed to rest. The antenna had been decommissioned. The psychic graveyard was closed. So we must look back at the sirens not as seductive, evil monsters, but as one of mythology's most tragic figures. They were not predators. They were conduits, trapped in a horrifying feedback loop of grief and death. Their beautiful voices, once a gift, were twisted by a curse into a weapon they did not control. Their island was not a lair, but a prison and a psychic amplifier. And their song was not a melody of temptation, but a terrifying, telepathic broadcast of the collected pain of all who had perished in their domain. They were the monstrous speakers for a graveyard that could never be silent. The heroes who faced them did not face a simple test of will against a beautiful song. They faced a battle for their very sanity against a tidal wave of pure, weaponized despair. Orpheus survived by offering a song of hope that was momentarily louder than the chorus of the dead. Odysseus survived by binding his body and relying on the ignorance of his crew, a victory of cunning and preparation over overwhelming psychic force. The story of the sirens is a chilling maritime ghost story on a cosmic scale. It is a reminder that some of a siren is not the beautiful voice promising you pleasure. It is the echo of every sailor who listened to that promise and found only death. It is the sound of the sea itself, keeping a sorrowful, eternal record of all the souls it has claimed. The most beautiful songs can sometimes be the most painful screams in disguise. Thank you for sailing these treacherous waters with us. If this unveiling of a classic myth has made you hear the story differently, show your support by liking this video, subscribing to Mythos Unveiled, and hitting the notification bell so you never miss another journey into the heart of our most haunting legends. What other monster do you believe is not what it seems? Let us know in the comments. Until next time, be wary of the songs that promise you everything you desire. You may not be prepared for the true price of listening.